Stitch Sisters, and we're coming today to talk to you about sewing machine needles. All of our, or quite a few of our sewers have asked us about all the different types you can get and about when they need to change them. They're always quite confused. So we thought if they are asking these kind of questions to us, then you probably need some answers as well. We've even had some ladies who have had their sewing machines for
a year,
X number of years, and have never changed their sewing needle. And so this can just mean that you get messy sewing and it's not very nice. So we thought we'd give you a little video to explain them all.
Yes. So you might be wondering how often you should change your sewing machine needle, and if you listen,
often, Rachel.
If you listen to the sewing machine companies and the needle manufacturers, then they will tell you that you should be changing your sewing machine needle about every 6 hours of sewing.
That's funny, that isn't it?
Yes,
almost
which
like
does
they want
seem
to sell
a
more
little
needles.
bit excessive. We probably, I reckon, about every 20 hours or so.
Yeah.
But even though that might seem like a really short space of time, you have to remember that that's time you're actually spent sewing. That's not time you're spent in your sewing room cutting patterns, pinning things together. That's the time that the needle is actually that's the time the needle's actually in use, which isn't that much. So on a maybe 2 or 3 hour project, you might be actually sewing for maybe 30-40 minutes. So it's not as often as you might think.
No.
But ignoring all of that, it's better to learn to look out for the signs that your needle might need changing. So your machine does some weird things when your needle's not happy.
It does.
And that might mean that your stitches look messy, that they're not looking very even anymore, they're looking a bit wibbly wobbly.
Or that you're getting nests underneath.
You might be getting threads underneath and everything's in place properly and you've checked and you've reseated your bobbin and it's still doing it. Do you want to come in, Macy?
Come here. You coming up?
No, she's not coming up. Sometimes it might be that it's actually causing little pulls in the fabric. So if it's blunt, then it might be causing runs either side of the needle.
Like runs in your tights.
Hole, either side of the stitch, yes. And that's just because the needle's too blunt and it's snagging the fabric instead of making a clean hole through it.
My favourite one is it makes a peculiar noise.
Just very loud. It just makes the machine very shouty all of a sudden, doesn't it?
It's going, change me!
So that can happen gradually over a period of time, so it might not necessarily be something that you notice initially. But the way we look at it is that needles are relatively cheap, and you're going to get the best results from changing them frequently. So if you're not sure and it's been a while, then just change it. And if you notice an improvement in your stitches, or it's a little bit quieter, then it was the right thing to do. And even if it wasn't, it's not really a problem.
How I tend to think of it is if I've got something, if I've got a special fabric or I'm starting a new project, I tend to think, right, okay, I'm doing
needle.
I'm ticking all the boxes. I'm getting my thread sorted, I'm getting a new needle out. And it just makes a big difference. I think it just makes your sewing cleaner.
It does, yes. And we all need all the help we can get for the best possible results.
If the machine's working well, then you're going to get great sewing.
Exactly. So, what type of needles are there?
Yes.
That's the next big question.
Types.
Many. You won't necessarily need them all.
No.
But we'll tell you about them anyway. So, your machine will come as standard with what is called either a universal or a standard needle. You'll notice that there are numbers. In fact, I've got some here. So, let me show you these. These are the ones that we stock in our haberdashery. And these are prim needles. And I don't know if you can... There we go. And you'll notice these numbers running along the bottom here. There are 2 sets of numbers. The bigger number at the top actually relates to the width of the needle, the diameter. So for most standard machines, it's this one here that's 90 at the top with 14 underneath. So 14 is the number of the needle and 90 means that it's 0.9 millimetre thick. So it's just under 1 millimetre thick. And as a general rule, the finer the fabric, the thinner the needle you would use, so the lower the number.
So like a silk or a
chiffon or something like that, you might really want to use a 12 or a 10 or even an 8 or a 9, depending on how fine it is. And if you were sewing something really thick like leather, that could be an 18 or a 20. So the lower the number, the finer the fabric, the higher the number, the thicker the fabric.
Excellent.
But a standard universal needle will do most jobs, won't it?
Yes.
So most fabrics, most medium weight fabrics.
Yes. All your cottons and everything like that, it will sew through all
It
of
will
them.
even sew some knit fabrics.
Yes.
But not all of them.
Yes.
So there is a special type of needle that is reserved for knit fabrics, sometimes called jersey and sometimes called ballpoint.
Yes.
Same thing, just slightly different names. So these prim ones here are called jersey, but they're ballpoint needles.
Yeah.
So ballpoint needle is only slightly different because instead of having a sharp point, it has a round point, a bit like a knitting needle.
Yes.
And that allows it to actually move between the fibres instead of piercing through them.
Yeah.
Which is because knit fabric is made of little loops, it's not woven.
Yeah.
Then the needle can get in between the loops.
Because on a knit you wouldn't want to separate the threads.
No,
because that would mean it would start
wouldn't be a loop
unraveling.
anymore.
Yeah.
So they're really handy for medium and heavyweight knit fabrics.
Yes.
There is a different type of jersey needle called a stretch.
Yes.
And that's for really lightweight needles. So
like
lightweight fabrics. So a really lightweight jersey, you can often tell because they're the ones that are a nightmare to sew.
Yes.
And they really curl up on the cut edge. And
like
I
a
hate sewing with
t-shirt
them.
jersey.
Yeah,
really
really thin ones. And often
Yeah.
if you try and sew those with either a standard needle or a ballpoint needle, you'll get skipped stitches.
Yes.
Which basically means that, you know, it will just have big long stitches where there should be several smaller ones.
Yes.
And often switching to a stretch needle can help with that because a stretch needle has a tiny little, it's called a scarf. But it's a tiny little hook.
It doesn't actually have a little tiny
Lots
scarf
of sewing
around
stuff
it.
is weird
It
names,
is,
isn't it?
yes.
So it's a little hook that's close to the eye of the needle and it keeps the thread closer to the eye of the needle so it can go in and out more cleanly and hopefully cut down on.
We very often
stitches.
get skip stitches when we use scuba, so that's the kind of thing if we stretch the seam.
Although scuba is a medium to heavyweight knit, so you would think that a ballpoint would do the job. But if you're finding any knit fabric that's really struggling and still getting skip stitches, it's worth trying a stretch needle instead.
Yeah. And then there's other ones which are for like denim and jeans. So have you got one there?
I've got one here.
So they'll show you what they look like. I like the prim ones because it actually shows you the fabric as well, so you can just go, oh, that's denim.
I'm trying to get it to focus.
So these ones are thicker and much stronger in the shaft, and they're very sharp. And the reason that is because obviously with denim and any kind of fabric like that, canvas or anything that's thicker, obviously once you've got a couple of hems in there, you've got quite a lot of fabric. So it needs to be sharper to go right the way through all of them. And they're great for that, but any kind of thick fabric.
Yeah, so great for curtains. If you're making curtains, that's usually heavier weight fabric, upholstery weight fabric. And when you're doing your hems or when there's multiple layers, then a denim needle can really help with that.
Yeah.
If you were making a coat and you were using a particularly heavy fabric or a bag,
yes, because you can get thick corners and things like that in the bags and things like that.
Then that's where a denim needle would help you out. But speaking of bag making,
yes,
there's another type of needle which is very helpful, which is a leather needle.
Yes, and this is another one for thick fabrics, but actually this is specifically for leather because it has a wedge-shaped point instead of
like a chisel. Yeah.
Instead of a sharp point, it's got a kind of wedge on it.
Yeah. And that just allows it to pierce through coated fabrics. So it's not just great for leather, it's also good for oilcloth, laminated cotton, anything.
Duck fabric that's got laminated on the top, isn't it?
Sometimes, sometimes it's got like a wax coating and stuff on it. So anything like that, a leather needle will be really helpful for that. So that's a few speciality needles. The other thing you might want a special needle for,
top stitching.
I was actually the queen of quilting.
I'm
these
a big
are quilting
quilter.
needles. There we
So
go.
these ones are really thin and really sharp. And the reason that they're
a bit longer too.
They're longer as well, but they're really sharp and really thin because they're going through multiple layers. I mean, they're very strong on the shaft as well. They're going through multiple layers, and obviously they're dealing with thick multiple layers of fabric, but also dealing with lots of seams. So as you're quilting, you're going over different seams. So they're much better for that. And I always use quilting.
But also good for when you're actually quilting with wadding or batting, because obviously that's quite thick.
Yes.
So it's just a much longer, thinner needle to be able to pierce through all of those
and
layers.
I must say, they do make a difference. When you use the right needle for the right thing, it does make such a difference.
And I think with quilting needles, I find quilting really hard work. I know you're used to it, but I love the patchwork bit. When it actually comes to quilting it, I just find it so hard work, going line after line after line.
Physically hard.
So if the needle can make the job a little bit easier for me, I'm going to take it.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. So those are my favourite ones. And then what else have we got?
Top stitching, you mentioned.
That's my other one, And that's
Nikki's
the basic
thing.
My other favourite thing. So the top stitching needle is specifically designed because nowadays we have top stitching thread, which is much thicker.
It's the sort of thing you see on your jeans. So when you see the flat felled seams running down the side of your jeans, usually that's in a thicker, like a goldy colour, sometimes navy.
Thread,
thicker thread. That's top stitching thread.
Yes, but to get that through a standard needle, you would probably end up shearing the thread.
Yeah, it would all
because
shred up.
The hole is too small. So they have top stitch needles which have a much bigger eye, which is specifically designed to help the thread move through.
Yeah,
freely.
It's also thicker on the shaft. So if you imagine that if the hole that you've made for the thread is too small, then your stitches aren't going to be very neat.
Yes.
If it's a thicker needle, it can make a bigger hole, and that's going to mean that the thread can pass through it much nicer, and it will all sit a lot smoother.
Exactly. Just like if you were hand sewing, you wouldn't use a tiny little thin needle and a great big bit of wool attached to it, because they don't match. So you have to have the same size of hole as the thread that's coming through.
Exactly. So the final one that we think that you might need, there are lots of other ones out there, but these are the ones that we've used, and to be honest, if we've not needed it so far, then we're probably not going to.
You might be a big fan of metallic thread or something, want some metallic needles.
Yeah.
But there are lots of different ones. I think we generally think if you're using something different, so if your fabric is not the normal fabric that you use, or if the thread is slightly different to what you normally use, check and see if there's a needle that will work. And if there isn't, just use your best
quick
guesstimate.
Google will do it. Just Google metallic thread and it will come up and say metallic needles, and then you'll go, oh,
that's the one.
I need that. So the last one that we think might be useful for you to see is a special one. This is your twin needle. So a twin needle is used with a standard sewing machine. Usually your bobbin winder could be converted into another spool holder. So usually you'll have another little spool holder in the kit that comes with your machine. You pop that on your bobbin winder and it allows you to thread your machine up with two threads. But one thing that people don't realise if they've not used a top stitching needle, I'm just gonna, it's a bit like opening a little present when you first open them, but let me just show you what it looks like, because it's not two individual needles, it's actually a single shaft, and then it divides into two needles. So you still insert it in the same way, it still goes into the same opening in the machine. It then converts it into two needles. And you would use a twin needle, often when you're hemming jerseys, or hemming anything where you want to get that ready to wear effect, where you've got a double row of stitching. What it does is it creates a double row of straight stitches, but it's like a little zigzag stitch on the back, so it does actually stretch, which is why it's good for knit fabrics.
Yes.
You can also just use it for decorative top stitching, but it's just a really nice effect.
It's one of those that gets very often overlooked. That lots of people get them with the machine
come with them,
and never use them. But it's definitely worth getting it out and having a little play.
It is, and most of the time threading the machine's really easy, because you would literally you have the two threads coming from different places, but they just go through the same thread guides, and then one goes through the left needle and one goes through the right, and you just sew as normal.
Obviously, if you have a machine needle threader, you'd have to manually thread them. The needle thredder wouldn't work on a double needle.
No. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the needles that we would use on a regular basis. As a general rule, buy the best you can afford. So our favourite brands are Schmetz, which is a German brand, which are usually the brand you get with your machine.
Yes.
And then Prim is another good brand. Hemline is another one. Just look out for budget needles. Sometimes you see a pack of multi-size needles and it might cost £1 or £2, and generally you get what you pay for. So it's not that they won't do the job, they will do the job perfectly well. So if you've already got them, don't throw them away.
No. But if it was an emergency and they were the only ones you could find, then buy them
it just
in the
means they'll
shop.
dull quicker,
Yeah.
so they won't last as long. So buying cheap
Yeah.
ones is a bit of a false economy, really.
Yeah,
'cause
and even
you end up replacing them
the
more
prim
often.
ones and the Schmetz ones, they're £4 or £5 for a pack of 5 or 6. So actually, they're not expensive. And you think how many hours sewing you get out of them?
Yeah.
They're not expensive.
And anything when you're sewing that helps you get a better result, so that you're happier with your finished product,
It's definitely good.
it's
yeah.
definitely worth. So that's it. We hope you found that useful, and hopefully you might try changing things up a little bit
And change
trying
your
a
knees
new
up.
needle. If you've not done it for a long time,
Yes.
stop watching this. Go and change it now.
Change your needle.
We'll be back soon with another video. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.